What's wrong with software engineering? What's wrong with software engineers? Why don't companies innovate? Why don't software engineers speak the same language as everybody else? If you work in and around software engineering, you probably understand this problem. Software engineering is difficult. It's difficult to work with engineers. Maybe we could say that they're not getting trained the right way. Maybe we need to rethink how engineering is being done. Well, today on the Product Driven Podcast, I've got a really great person on the show you want to check out, Karell Ste-Marie, and we're going to talk all about these problems and more today. To survive and thrive, you must adopt a product-driven mindset. And we're back for another episode of Product Driven. This is your host, Matt Watson. Very excited to be joined today by Karell Ste-Marie. He runs a very growing and popular YouTube channel called the Serious CTO. Although from talking to Karell, I don't know how serious he really is. Karell, welcome to the show today.
Well, first of all, welcome. Being a CTO is some serious business. Let's just stick with that tagline for now.
Well, I think today we want to talk about how, I think something needs to change about how we do software engineering, maybe how we train software engineers. And I guess maybe to start, I think, Karell, you already know this, like 90% of startups fail, and almost every large company I can think of has no idea how to innovate. So how are we doing with software engineering? How well is it really working?
Well, here's the thing. In 1999, my partner and I, we founded an innovation company. Our entire business model was to actually create a software so that companies could innovate better. I've seen horror stories like you wouldn't believe. So, can companies innovate? Very rarely. I think there's a lot of this is how it's always been type of culture out there. There's a lot of resistance to change because change is kind of scary. It's unknown. It's something different. I mean, why would I go away from the pain that I know today to something completely unknown tomorrow? I mean, maybe I'm not happy where I am right now, but maybe tomorrow will be worse.
Well, we're all creatures of habit for sure, right? I mean, in every
Absolutely.
phase of life, like we want to maintain status quo, even if status quo isn't that good. It's just what we're used to. We're like, we're good. We're used to this version of
100%.
hell, and we're okay with this version of hell. We'll just stay in this version.
Absolutely. And that's usually how people see it. Better the devil that you know than the one that you don't. And
Well,
also, there's effort and change. Why would I want to do effort? Learn things? Oh my God, no.
and do you think that's like the deep-seated culture in most of these large companies? It's just you're always fighting against the way you've always done things, or do you think it's more also in just how software engineering and product teams function, or it's a leadership problem, or all of these things?
I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. Um, Programmers, by their nature, it's a profession that tends to attract a lot of introverted people. Um, Introverted people don't say no very well. I mean, they're either afraid that they're going to piss someone off, or they're just not going to get approval, or maybe, if they say no, they're not going to get that promotion because they'll just look incompetent because they're essentially admitting that they can't do it. They're supposed to be able to do anything. That's one big problem. And then you take that group of people, you make them very intelligent, very technical. It almost gives them their own language. So all of a sudden, you have a whole bunch of people that are supposed to speak English that aren't speaking English. And then the folks that are not technical can't understand them anymore, which now makes them into these like mythical coworkers that nobody just gets. Kind of leave them aside, don't socialize with them too much, and they are kind of socially awkward. And they don't understand business goals. And that's a big thing. If you want to move up in a company, you have to understand not just the technical aspects, the nuts and bolts, but you have to understand the business itself.
Why are we
And I
doing
find
that?
that why are we doing this? Because, the goal is actually to I'll say it, is to make money. If we're not making money, then you don't get a salary. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a suit or a hoodie, or riding a skateboard or in a BMW. It just does not matter. So the goal is to make money. And you have these people that are incredibly intelligent. And I am definitely in that category. At least I used to write code, maybe not incredibly intelligent, but you don't get business for the first, what, 10 years of your life, at least not as much as you should. And then for the suits, you have to work with this group of people. You can't understand them. You can't really get a straight answer out of them. You can't really plan your business around them. And they don't seem to want any money. So where do you connect? And then there's the whole education aspect and things like that. But it's essentially it's very different mindset, very different culture, very different language. And it's like nobody tries to meet the other one in the middle. So you have this collaboration that needs to happen between those two groups. They need each other. A company is not going to exist if you don't have a product.
But they
The
speak different
product,
languages, to your point.
but they speak different languages, so they don't understand each other. So how do you move forward when you can't even express a yes or a no, or a we're gonna die if we don't get this uh, type of
Well, you
situation?
only move forward if you have somebody probably like yourself or me who speaks both of those languages, right? Like we, as an executive and a leader, we can meet with the rest of the business people and understand what needs to be done, needs to be accomplished, right? And then we can meet with the engineering team and we can speak their language and we can bridge the gap. But
Yes.
not a lot of people like us that are actually good at both.
No. No. You've just basically defined one of the key roles it is to be I would say, a dev lead, a senior developer, or definitely a CTO, is you have to be able to speak both languages. It's critical to have that in a company. You're not going to go anywhere without it. Um, it comes from a lot of experience, and it comes from having a lot of mistakes, uh, on your belt.
So you
I'm
describe
drawing a
yourself as
blank.
the serious CTO. So my question for you is, how do you think most people become a CTO? And I have an answer to this, but I want to hear
Mm.
your answer.
There are so many paths to becoming a CTO. Um, I had almost a decade of experience under my belt when I basically, with my business partner in '99, we decided to, create a company. So I basically became a CTO overnight. Was I ready? No, absolutely not. The mistakes accumulated, at a kind of a scary pace. Um, Other people will become a CTO. They go to a big organization. They have a lot of references. They have a lot of experience, and they're hired into the role. It's their first time. I think that would be the opposite, aspects of that. Um, I think it's so different for so many people that people don't realize that it's easy and it's hard at the same time. I think it's easy to call yourself one, but it's very difficult to keep calling yourself one because it tends
Well,
to fall apart a lot quite fast if you're not up to it.
so I did a very non-scientific poll on LinkedIn one day about how people became a CTO, and I got like hundreds of people that replied to it. So maybe it's a little scientific. About half of them said they became a CTO from starting their own company, which is how
Yes.
you became a CTO. It's how I
Yes.
became a CTO. And honestly, I feel like I don't want to say it's the only way, but it's by far the best way because it just throws you right into the fire. You know, for a
Yep.
lot of software engineers and technical people that are very introverted, all of a sudden it forces you out of your shell, right? You're like, I'm running a business here. I got to find customers. I got to talk to customers. I got to build something they want. I got to make some money, right? Like all of a sudden your whole view of the world has to change dramatically, right? Somebody once told me that a lot of software engineers are like mushrooms in the basement. Like if you're going to be the CTO, you cannot be a mushroom in the basement. Cannot
No.
be. You cannot be. you've got to be front and center. You're running a business here. That is the best way. To me, that is the best way. It doesn't mean there are other ways to do it, but to me, that is the best way. Trial by fire. Go start your own business. Even if it's a consulting, freelancing, like any of it, you're going to learn so much just from having to deal with all that business side of it that you're never going to learn in some giant corporation trying to climb the corporate ladder very slowly over a very long period of time.
Absolutely. And in some cases, it doesn't have to be overnight. I mean, some stuff you're going to have to change rather quickly. I mean, if you take a startup, for instance, on day one, hopefully you have a business partner that, is a bit more uh, closer to the outside world than you are, and they can, sort of facilitate that a little bit. Um, as long as you have a good connection to that person, it's not going to be as abrupt and unpleasant as, it sounds like. Some things are going to be very gradual. You have a good relationship with this person. You can be honest with them. They already know you. They already know that if you're standing a certain way, you're trying to say no, but you just can't, and you're blocking or some things like that. They, you know, you have this good relationship that really helps into the soft skill aspect of the role. But sooner or later, you are going to have to stand in front of someone that's completely alien to your relationship circle and basically have to say no and then explain why you're saying no. Or worse, not say no, but convince them that it's a bad idea, which requires a lot of finessing and, diplomatic skills. So, yeah, a lot of people will become CTOs by founding their own company. And I find that that is probably one of the best ways because you tend to grow as a person with the company, with the challenges.
Yeah.
Everything comes in like once at a time instead of being thrown down the ravine and can't grab onto anything, which is what would happen if you were, hired as a CTO and it's your first time and you've never been a CTO before. That's basically what the experience, the whole thing is going to feel like. But if you can grow with a company and you can make one mistake at a time, learn from it, and hopefully recover, or maybe make the mistake a couple of times and then you finally learn from it, that's usually how I go. Then eventually you become someone that's pretty good for the business. Um, it's different. I couldn't have imagined myself becoming a CTO in another way because I think I would have abruptly failed because in a bigger company, you don't have a lot of opportunities to make big mistakes and learn from them and recover. I mean, there's a lot more at stakes there. So I think it's a good approach.
So from your perspective, how important is it that a CTO has a really good sense from the product perspective, like helping have the product vision, manage the product, maybe managing even the product team versus just being more on the technical architecture side of the technology part of it? How important do you think the product part is? And maybe that has changed over time, but in today's world, how important do you think that
Yeah,
is?
I think that you need to become best bud with some of the product managers and really get to understand what you're selling, what it's supposed to do, what is your market, who's your audience. If you stay only in the technology, back in 99 or today, it's just not going to work. At the end of the day, a lot of technical people, they seem to place value in writing code. When you want to be in business, you're not writing code and the code magically transforms into money. You're solving problems. And when you solve problems, that transforms into revenue. And that's the big distinction. So you need to understand your product beyond its technical nuts and bolts very, very quickly if you're going to be you're going to have any sort of success.
Well, when you go start your own company, much like I did when I was 23 years old, I was thrust right into the product part of it too, right? I'm not only I was building the software, architecting the software, but I was also the product expert. There was no product team. It was me, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's the other part of it that starting your own business kind of forces. It forces you to have to own the product. I mean, unless you're at some super well-funded startup that can afford to go hire a big product team or something, it's usually you.
Yeah. And it should be. It definitely should be. that makes you a lot more accountable. You can't blame anybody else. You can't pass the buck. You're it. And you have to go the extra mile and basically understand not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. What problems are you trying to solve? And that's night and day. I mean, you look into some products that are being launched today, and not necessarily by startups. I think a lot of startups, when they get it right, they get it like really spot on. But some big companies, when they launch a new product, sometimes you wonder, what were they thinking? It just doesn't make any sense. And I think that's because there are so many people that have all these micro roles inside the product. Nobody really understands what the whole thing is supposed to do. Or maybe they just didn't get there yet.
Well, I think there's a lot of software developers that start weird little side projects and side hustles because they think it's cool or they want to build something and then they try and build a business out of it. But they don't necessarily understand business or strategy or product strategy. They're like, I don't know, I just kind of built this little thing because it was something fun to do on the side, which is totally fine. And there are a lot of good innovations that come from that. But I feel like a lot of people struggle because they don't know how to do sales, or they miss part of the strategy, or understanding the market, understanding the industry, all that kind of stuff. It's just this little side project. I think a lot of the challenges, a lot of software engineers are innovators and can be entrepreneurial. Like they want to build stuff, right? They want to build some kind of startup, but they don't have any ideas. They don't have deep industry experience or know how to take that leap.
Yeah, I think that's especially true of developers. You tend to have this mindset where everything is so simple for you that it's not a challenge worth exploring. In your mind, the problem's already solved. So you don't become too excited by that. It's not very motivating. But if you stop for a minute and start to actually create something, then you're going to see that there's still a lot of opportunities for this to be very interesting. And it's a good way to keep your skills sharp and also to get comfortable pushing out of the box or making the box bigger, depending on what kind of personality you are.
Well, I think you highlight something really important about, and I write about this in my book and Product Driven, about one of the hardest things for engineers is realizing that they're not the user, right?
No.
And they've got to have empathy for the user. Like they've got to almost like be able to picture them, name them, know who they are, understand them, and have empathy for them, right? You know, most software engineers are extremely intelligent, very introverted, as we've talked, and a lot of them are gifted on the IQ scale. Most software engineers have an IQ of 115 and above, and a lot of them are very talented, very gifted. But it makes it harder probably for them to relate for who the average user is, right? Like the average user reads at like a fifth grade level, not very technical, not necessarily all that bright at using technology and all this stuff. And most people that are using software like don't even want to use it, right? They're like, I don't know, I have to use this thing. I don't even want to use this thing. I want to use it as fast as possible and stop using it, right? Where engineers, like, we tend to over engineer things, and I think we struggle to have empathy and understanding of who the user is.
Couldn't agree more. It's difficult to have empathy when your IQ tends to be higher than the norm. You tend to see things very, very differently. Not only that, you think different. You approach the problems very differently. You almost feel, most of the folks that end up as developers got picked on in school. They were bullied by, the average, intelligence kids who, there's nothing wrong with that. They'll do very well as well. They'll go on to different careers. They probably won't solve problems that require advanced math of, algorithms that are 30, 40 lines long, or in some cases, maybe 1,000 lines long. It's perfectly fine, but you can't relate to that because how are you going to meet? You have almost nothing in common. They'll talk about, football and sports and things like that. And all you're thinking is like, that's a nightmare. I don't even want to think about sports. But on the flip side, I can think about all those cool things I can do with electronics and computers. Now, that's
Yeah.
fun. And that's also safe because the bullies aren't there. So that's where I want to go. I want to feel safe and grow a career and, be respected for my intelligence and the things that I can create and the talents that I do have.
So
They
how do we
they they won't relate until they're basically put in a situation where they have to, and that'll be a shock.
so how do we solve this problem? We've got very smart software engineers, highly intelligent, great at solving problems, and highly logical people, but most of them are like mushrooms in the basement. A lot of them struggle to understand the customer, to have empathy for them. You described it. A lot of them struggle to say no or challenge like what needs to be done. Um, and a lot of companies really struggle to innovate and continue to grow. How do we solve this?
First of all, what I would tell the developers is relating to the end user is probably not necessarily the goal that you want. Maybe put that aside for a second and solve the immediate problem that you have. Don't try to think about the next one or the one after that. And, developers tend to do this, on and on and on, and it just never ends. And they're up to problem number 10 in their minds. That's not the way to go. Keep things very simple, solve the first problem that's in front of you, and let's just leave it at that. And then pass it over to the user and see what the user says and listen to them. Don't try to answer with technical terms, get what they're saying. Um, I've seen software designed by engineers where sometimes the save button is in these places where you can barely find it. And I have a lot of experience with technical things. So if I can't find it, then there's a big problem. So they tend to just design for their own mindsets. How do you take the mushroom out of the basement? I'm not sure if you can, because unfortunately that's where it thrives. But maybe every now and then, you can have, dare I say, a cultural exchange between the hoodie and the t-shirt wearers versus the suits, and they can mingle a little bit, but not have take it one step at a time. I mean, on one side you have people that, you know, the non-developers, they don't want to admit that they're facing people that are of IQ levels a lot higher than them. They feel very intimidated. But maybe what they can understand is that the dev feels equally intimidated for very different reasons. I mean, here you are meeting what would have been your bully in school. So that's intimidating. Take it one step at a time and develop a relationship. I mean, I would basically have devs at office parties. Um, we would force them not to sit together and kind of spread out a little bit and make them sit with people from other teams. Now, there was still always a couple of them that would, you'd eventually have the QA table, and then you'd have the executive table and things like that. That's you can't really avoid that. But get them to mingle in social gatherings, and also maybe go observe someone in what they have to do in their own jobs. Up and until I was on a couple of sales calls, I didn't understand what the hell sales was doing. I didn't even understand why they exist. For me, it was just, okay, this guy goes around with a suit and looks good and flashes his business cards and he gets the big bucks. Why? I mean, I could be doing that. Well, maybe not. Everybody has their own role to play. And I think if you're going to teach devs to have empathy, maybe the best way for them to learn empathy is to be shown what empathy is. And I think, unfortunately, since devs tend to be the non-social kind and the introverted kind, I think someone's going to have to take the first step and not be a dev.
Well, so in product driven, in my book, I write a lot about this problem. And to me, I think it all starts with leadership. Like leadership has to invest the time, even if it's just a few minutes, to always bring that customer perspective, the business perspective, what the outcomes are, and getting that information to the team, talking to the team from that point of view about the release we did, how it went, the benefit it had, the feedback we got from the customers, all this kind of information, right? Like getting the customer feedback is really important to give to the team, and getting the team to spend a few minutes here and there talking to sales, watching a demo, looking at support tickets, like involved in these other parts of it that puts the focus on the customer instead of internal. I feel like too many engineering teams are always focused on internal problems, which are code problems, which could be
Yes.
architecture, it could be technical debt, could be maintenance. It's like they're all internal problems when really our whole job is to solve customer problems. But the only way that they're really going to
Yes.
understand that and keep that point of view is if you keep the customer point and center, to me.
I have to agree with that. Very recently, and I tend to be a very, literally, a very black and white person. And recently, someone recreated a new logo for me. And I kept wondering, how come this isn't black and white? This is basically the entire image I have. And I think it plays well into, the message that I'm sending. But after a little bit of research, I came to understand why there was color and why it was that particular color. And it's very subconscious, is very psychological. These folks basically knew something that I didn't understand. And here I was going to basically, cast it away and say, like, forget this stuff. I don't agree with it. I know my stuff. I'm going to be stubborn and I'm going to stick to my guns. But they actually did know something that I didn't. And now I understood why they did it this way. You're going to look at a salesperson do PowerPoint, and don't get me wrong, I have no love for static presentations and things like that. That's one of the reasons why I do video. But on the flip side, for a dev, you look at PowerPoint, it's like this thing is static, it's dumb, there's nothing appealing about it. But they don't understand the science behind presenting something. So again, they have to open up a little bit. They have to learn outside of their expertise. At the end of the day, this is about mastering the other person's language. Are you going to have a non-technical resource at some point really step into the technical pit and they're going to learn to understand and speak fluent tech? I don't think so. There's going to be someone at some point that's going to throw a couple of terms around and that person's going to go like, what? I don't get what you're saying. So I think that if devs want to keep thinking that they are that much smarter than everybody else, then they need to take the first step in terms of communication. Someone else needs to take the social step, but I think the tech needs to make some efforts over communicating in a way that they can be understood. And trust me, every dev out there knows how to be understood to some extent and how not to be. It's a strategy.
Well, I think one of the most valuable things we learn in life that has always been the same for all generations before us is storytelling, right? Like a good story is how you state your case. Why are we going to do this thing? Why are we going to do this technical debt? Why should we do this project? Why shouldn't we do this project? Right? Like, and almost in everything in life, especially in sales, a lot of it, it's all storytelling, right? And I think engineers are probably not very natural at that. But even
No,
if they want to make an argument for, well, why should we do this project or why should we do this thing, right? They have to learn the storytelling. And a lot of them, if they were listening right now, they might be like, "What in the hell is this guy talking about?" But storytelling is a lot of times how you sell stuff and how you get a message across. It's your PowerPoint, if it lacks a good story, is not going to get a good message across.
and it would be, I would argue that it's something that a dev would intellectually understand. It is something that they need to master because how are you going to one day ask for a better tool or more budget or a new laptop that, allows you to work faster? If you can't tell a story, then you can't make a business case out of anything. And if you can't make a business case out of anything, then you'll never be able to explain to a suit that has the checkbook that they need to write a check to make your life easier. And it's amazing how devs don't get that. It's like, okay, I'm not talking about, creating Star Wars or Lord of the Ring. I'm talking about actually creating something that someone else will understand where you have, okay, here's my context, here's the hero, probably me. And then the hero is faced with a challenge that they need to overcome. Maybe there's a mentor or a logical person in there that basically gives them a couple of tips or not. It doesn't really matter, but they figure out what the problem is. And then in order to resolve the problem, the big challenge or beat the dragon, they need a check to be written. Then they get the new laptop. Then they get the new uh, IDE or the new platform or the new server. Devs don't get that. I mean, so many years because I didn't explain things in that language. And I'm not talking about necessarily a presentation, but basically explain it like a story that can be understood, like a business case.
Yeah.
Here I was reusing the same 5-year-old machines that I already had for 10 years. They were so incredibly slow, I couldn't do much with them, but I was like, this is all I got. And that's really the mentality of a dev is like you get to be stuck with the problem. And you focus so much on the problem that you forget that there's a very simple solution. And all you got to do for that solution to happen is to go explain the problem in a way that's well understood and ask for help in a very reasonable solution. And there we go. Now we just made a business case and the check gets written and you get a new server and everything's happy. But
You know what's funny
you don't
about
get
this is,
that.
software engineers are really good at figuring out how many point stories are, but they're not very good at writing the story.
Well, I I I would almost I agree with you, and I'm tempted to say I don't agree with you because then we're going to go into the realm of estimates and things like that. But yeah, it's true. I get the analogy, and that's really the problem. And making a business case, I would argue I don't care what kind of scale that you're on. If you have the right mindset, that has a story of 1 point. A business case is easy. Okay, I have a problem. Where am I getting stuck? Explain that part really well. Then, once you do that, and you don't leave it at that, God forbid, because then the person will just look at you and go like, okay, so what do you want me to do? You haven't given them a solution. So then you go on with the solution and you explain the solution, you explain the cost of the solution, but then you don't leave it there. Then you continue on to say, and if with this expense, then I'll be able to save this, which could be time, money, it could be rework, it could be less bugs, I could reduce churn and MTTR. And those are all things that the business will benefit from. That ultimately it's a short-term investment for a long-term gain. So what's the problem? It's like we're not trying to solve this 5-year-old computer. That's not the problem we're trying to solve. What we're trying to do is that we're trying to make more money for the business so that
Yeah.
you can get advancement, you can get a raise, you can get that 1 month vacation instead of 2 weeks, the way that you've always hoped to. And God forbid, your pager doesn't go with you on vacation. And how are you going to do that? Well, you're actually going to solve problems instead of focusing on hypothetical problems that you invent yourself. And then you put yourself in a box. You put
Yep.
yourself in box thinking. And that is, in my opinion, a very widespread problems of devs. How many
Yep.
times have I heard like, well, I can't explain that to my boss. Well, have you tried? Have you tried this week? Have you tried today? It's like, and keep on trying. It's, I just don't get that. But
Yep.
then again, I went through
Different
a lot of
languages.
pain and agony of
Speaking
being
different
thrown in this
languages.
role.
Well, Karell, I've really enjoyed having you on the show today. I need to go and watch a lot more of your YouTube videos. Why don't you tell us a little more about your YouTube and other things that you do, how people can learn more about you?
Well, the YouTube videos are produced. First of all, I don't teach code. I think there's probably 4 million channels out there to teach code and teach it very well. I don't think we need more of that. What I do in my channel is that I teach all the soft skills that I believe that you should have learned when you were learning code. And I don't mean a substitute, I mean with code.
Yeah.
How to say no, how to have the right mindset, how to be resilient in your job, how to basically spot burnout before it happens, how to basically, improve your craft, how to spot these new technologies, not like they're shiny new toys and you need to try the new toy, but really, this is a new technology we can really benefit from. It will solve problems and all those aspects. So these subjects are almost endless, but it's a question of approaching it with a certain perspective. Not everything can be solved with code out there. And human relationships and human interactions is definitely one of them. And you're never going to be rich or happy on your own. You need to accept that. And sooner or later, you need to learn a couple of soft skills to work with the people that can help you become more successful. It's a give-give relationship.
Well, thanks again for being on the show today. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up today?
Focus on problems. That's what your job is. Your job is not to write code. Your job is to solve problems. Once you can understand the distinction between this is a code thing and this is a problem thing, a lot of doors will open up and your perspective will start to, uh, you'll see more of what you should be seeing.
All right. I totally agree with you. Wrote a book about this. Check out Product Driven, the book. And
I honest to God did not read it yet. I will. But this is just purely my opinions that I'm saying.
yeah, no problem. All right. Well, Karell, thank you so much for being on the show today. Again, guys, you can check him out, the Serious CTO on YouTube. And thank you, sir, for being here today.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Before we wrap up today's episode, we have a special resource for you if you're looking to elevate your development team to have more of a product-driven mindset. I have a fantastic free ebook about turning your code-first team into a product-first team. Please go to fullscaleteam.com/product-first-teams to download this free ebook. There's also a link in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Product Driven, and we'll see you in the next episode.